Imagine this. A liberal professor tries to publicly humiliate a student she doesn't like, only to realize she just challenged a certified genius, a 170 IQ prodigy. And not just any genius. We're talking about Barron Trump. Dr. Andrea Ghez was a name that carried weight. She was known for two things: her sharp mathematical mind and her not-so-subtle political agenda. The students in her advanced calculus class were used to her unconventional teaching methods, but that morning something felt different. The whiteboard, usually covered in complex equations, instead displayed a single phrase: today's topic, redefining academic priorities. In the back of the room sat a tall, reserved young man. He wasn't one to seek attention, but his name was known by everyone: Barron Trump. What most of his classmates didn't realize was that beneath his quiet demeanor lay a mind that would soon leave them speechless. Dr. Ghez began her lecture with an unusual tone, her confidence bordering on arrogance. Mathematics, she announced, is important, but it must make room for more pressing social discussions. A murmur ran through the students. Some shifted uncomfortably. They had signed up for calculus, not a debate on politics. Then Barron's hand went up. The professor's eyes flicked toward him, a flicker of irritation crossing her face. She hadn't expected anyone to challenge her narrative, let alone him. Ignoring his raised hand, she continued. Too often we see privileged students dominate academic spaces while ignoring the social inequities that allow them to do so. A gaze swept across the room before settling pointedly on Barron. Some of you might need to accept that your place in this class isn't necessarily a reflection of merit. The room tensed. The implication was clear. Still, Barron's hand remained raised, calm, patient. Students exchanged glances, sensing that something big was about to happen. Finally, Dr. Ghez sighed dramatically and nodded toward him. Yes, Mr. Trump. Do you have something to add to our discussion about privilege? The lecture hall fell silent. Barron's voice, steady and respectful, carried through the room. Dr. Ghez, calculus is fundamental to both theoretical and applied sciences. Many of us took this class to deepen our mathematical understanding. Wouldn't reducing the core curriculum disadvantage all students, regardless of background? Several students nodded. It was a fair question. Dr. Gez's smile was tight. Mr. Trump, she said, deliberately emphasizing his last name, perhaps you, of all people, should recognize how privilege skews perspectives. Not everyone had private tutors or elite prep schools to pave their way. Barron didn't flinch. Instead, he smiled, kind, patient. You're absolutely right, Professor. I've been fortunate in my education. That's exactly why I believe maintaining high academic standards is crucial. Shouldn't every student, regardless of privilege, be given the best education possible? The professor's expression darkened. And you think you know better than your professor about maintaining academic standards? Her voice dripped with sarcasm. Tell me, Mr. Trump, what makes you such an expert on mathematical education? I'm no expert, Barron admitted, just a student who loves mathematics. But I believe in learning without political distractions. He gestured to the empty whiteboard. Wouldn't our time be better spent exploring the complexities of calculus? The class held its breath. Dr. Gez's smirk returned. Very well, Mr. Trump. Since you're so passionate about mathematics, let's put that to the test. She turned to the board and began writing, fast and with purpose. The problem she presented wasn't just difficult, it was beyond the course level, something typically seen in graduate studies. A few students murmured in disbelief. One whispered, "That's brutal." Dr. Ghez stepped back, crossing her arms. Since you're so concerned with academic rigor, Mr. Trump, why don't you solve this for us? Barron stood, unbothered. Of course. He walked to the board, his expression unreadable. Dr. Gez's smirk widened until she saw his eyes scan the equation, not with confusion, but with fascination. Then he picked up the marker. "Before I begin," he said, turning to the class, "I noticed multiple ways to solve this. Would you like to see the standard method or a more elegant approach using Leibniz's original techniques?" Dr. Gez's face froze. "You've studied Leibniz's original papers?" Barron nodded. "Yes, in German. The translations lose some of his insights." He turned back to the board. "But let's let the math speak for itself." What followed left the class in stunned silence. Barron's hand moved swiftly, each step of his solution precise and clear. But what truly caught everyone's attention was his calm narration. "This first step," he explained, "follows Euler's simplification technique from 1755. Now, we could proceed traditionally, but Leibniz's approach is more elegant and efficient." His marker danced across the board, solving what should have taken a full period in mere minutes. The room was transfixed. Even the most sceptical students were leaning forward, absorbing his every word. Then, just as he was finishing, the door burst open. Dean Richardson, a known advocate for Dr. Gez's political initiatives, entered. "Andrea," he announced, "we need you for an urgent faculty meeting." Dr. Gez straightened, seizing the opportunity. "We'll have to continue this later," she said quickly, moving toward the door. But Barron wasn't done. "Professor," he said, his voice polite but firm, "you challenged me to solve this in front of the class. Leaving now would teach an unfortunate lesson about academic integrity." Murmurs spread through the room. Phones were out recording. The dean's face darkened. "Young man, are you suggesting—" "I'm stating a fact," Barron interrupted. Dr. Gez issued a challenge. I accepted. "The only question is, will she honour it?" Silence. Then Barron did something no one expected. He handed the marker to Dr. Gez. "Or perhaps you'd like to demonstrate the solution yourself?" His voice was steady, with no mockery, just a challenge wrapped in perfect politeness. Dr. Gez's hand clenched around the marker. Her face was unreadable. Then, with a huff, she tossed it onto the tray. "This is a waste of time," she muttered. Barron sighed and picked up the marker. In under 5 minutes, he completed both solutions, the standard method and Leibniz's approach. As he wrote the final line, the class erupted in applause. He turned to Dr. Gez. "Mathematics," he said, "doesn't care about politics. It only cares about truth." He gestured toward the board. "And truth, Professor, is what we should always seek in education." The dean cleared his throat. "Mr. Trump, while your skills are impressive, that we should learn less math because of someone's political agenda?" A voice from the back interrupted. More students stood, voicing their agreement. Barron stepped forward. "Professor, your mathematical knowledge is valuable. Let's focus on that. I'd even be happy to tutor my peers after class if needed." Dr. Gez hesitated. Then, finally, she nodded. And just like that, a single lesson reshaped the entire classroom and proved that brilliance transcends politics. This story is a powerful reminder that kindness costs nothing, but can mean everything to someone in need. Barron Trump's actions show us that true generosity isn't about making headlines. It's about seeing people, truly seeing them, and choosing to help without expecting anything in return. In a world where we often rush past each other, too caught up in our own lives, this moment reminds us of the beauty of slowing down, listening, and showing compassion. It teaches us that even the smallest acts of kindness, a helping hand, a word of encouragement, or simply believing in someone, can change a life. And perhaps in lifting others, we find the best version of ourselves. Imagine how different the world could be if we all chose kindness. Not just when it's convenient, but when it matters most. Because in the end, what we give from the heart always finds its way back. If you enjoyed the story and found it meaningful, don't forget to leave a like. It really helps us reach more people. We'd also love to hear from you. Share your thoughts and the lessons you've learned in the comments below. Your insights could inspire someone